Hello everyone, so this is Chantel with Lovely Studios and we are traveling. We are headed to Dallas, so I figured while we are headed to Dallas from North Carolina, we are now in Mississippi. I said let me go ahead and see if I can get some work done. I was supposed to finish recording the series we started on melanin. And because of my hip and back injury, just the pain level and having to really focus on healing and making this trip happen, I was not able to get those episodes recorded. So I said, while I'm driving, let me go ahead and see if we can get this done. So if you happen to hear some outside noise or it's a little you hear some stuff in the environment, that's because we are in the road. My husband is driving, and but I said, let's see if we can knock these out, see if we can make this happen. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with episode 4. Okay, it is the Melanin Deep Dive, and today we're going to talk about something that I consider foundational to understanding black skin specifically: the actual chemical differences between the two primary forms of melanin in the human body, and why those differences have real clinical implications for how your skin responds to inflammation, to UV exposure, and to the hormonal changes of midlife. I'm going to walk you through the science and then immediately connect it to what you actually see in your skin every day. Okay? So the chemical structure differences, let's start there with some of the chemical structure differences. So both forms of melanin, Eumelanin and Pheomelanin, are synthesized from tyrosine through the tyrosinase enzyme pathway. Tyrosinase is the enzyme that drives melanin production. They diverge at a specific point in that pathway. When amino acid called cysteine enters the process, the synthesis shifts towards pheomelanin. Without cysteine incorporation, the pathway continues towards eumelanin. So that cysteine makes a difference. Eumelanin has a cross-linked polymer structure that makes it exceptionally stable. Its energy conversion efficiency under UV radiation is estimated at greater than 99.9%, meaning that when UV photons hit eumelanin, almost all of that energy is converted to harmless heat rather than damaging reactive oxygen species. That is an extraordinary level of photoprotection. Pheomelanin contains sulfur in its chemical structure, which makes it behave very differently under UV exposure. Pheomelanin does not dissipate UV energy as efficiently under UVA specifically. Ooh, hold on, y'all. Look, real quick, we're going bridge to Louisiana. I do not like this bridge, but look at that. Look at that. Yep. Look at that. All right, I just wanted to show you guys that. Back to the melanin. So, pheomelanin can undergo reactions that generate reactive oxygen species, superoxide, and hydrogen peroxide. This means that pheomelanin, under the right conditions, can actually contribute to oxidative DNA damage rather than preventing it. So in plain terms, think of eumelanin like a very efficient shock absorber. When the sunlight hits it, eumelanin converts almost all of that energy into heat, harmless dispersed heat, before it can ever damage your DNA. That is the protection. Pheomelanin, the form found in lighter skin tones, does not absorb as efficiently under certain UV conditions. It actually generates damaging compounds instead of neutralizing them. This is part of why lighter skin tones have higher rates of UV-related DNA damage and skin cancer. What this means for you is that the melanin you carry is genuinely protective, but protection is not immunity, and understanding the difference matters for how you approach the sun, for how you approach sun exposure. What this means for black skin, let's talk about what it means for black skin or the darker skin complexions. For black skin, which has a higher concentration of eumelanin and it produces more efficiently, the photoprotective advantage is real, okay? Studies have estimated that the photoprotection provided by eumelanin in darker skin tones is equivalent to a sun protection factor between 13 and 15. That is huge. It's not absolute protection, but it is substantial. So it's a shield, it's imperfect. However, what that means is eumelanin dominance also means that the inflammation pathways in black skin operate in the context of a melanin system that is highly responsive to stimulation. When inflammation occurs from any source, UV, bacteria, mechanical, trauma, internal, hormonal signaling, inflammatory cytokines upregulate melanocyte activities. Cytokines are chemical messengers for your immune system, and those are sent. And because eumelanin production is efficient and responsive, the pigmentation response is often disproportionate to what might be expected based on the severity of the insult. This is the mechanism behind post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, or PIH. The dark marks that black skin leaves after acne, after a scrape, after an inflammatory skin condition, those are the melanites that are not malfunctioning. They're doing exactly what they were calibrated to do. They're responding to an inflammatory signal with melanin production. So your melanin production is increasing. The challenge is that the calibration is sensitive, and it's more sensitive than in lower eumelanin capacity, within in skin that has a lower eumelanin capacity. So in plain terms, this is the explanation behind post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. The dark marks your skin leaves after a pimple, a cut, or any kind of inflammation. Your melanocytes, the cells that make melanin, are receiving a chemical message that says, I'm in inflammation. And this happened here, and they respond by producing melanin. It's a protective healing response. It is not a flaw. Okay? The reason black skin leaves more pronounced dark marks than lighter skin is because your eumelanin system is more responsive, not because there's something wrong. Understanding that really changes how you approach treatment, because the goal is to reduce the inflammatory trigger, not just lighten the surface. Okay? So inflammation, melanin, and skin signals. Let's start tying this all together. The skin signals connection here is where skin signals and the melanin conversation come together very, very specifically. Is when I see a post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation on a client's face, right? I'm not looking at a cosmetic concern. I am looking at a map of where the inflammation has been and the location of those marks, which zones on the face, right? Skin signals. It tells me something about the internal inflammatory pattern that produced them. So the melanocytes do not discriminate between external inflammation and internal inflammation. Or hormonal surge that creates inflammation internally can trigger melanocyte activation just as a UV burn does. This is why hormonal hyperpigmentation, melasma, is so much more in common with women than in men, and why it intensifies in pregnancy and in perimenopause. The fluctuating hormones create inflammatory signals that the eumelanin, dominant melanocyte system, responds to with pigmentation. So again, in plain terms, melasma, the hormonal dark patches that appear on the face during pregnancy or perimenopause. It is not caused by sun exposure alone. It is caused by hormonal fluctuation, creating inflammatory signals that your melanocytes are responding to. This is why some sunscreen may help. Don't use that, but it's not fully prevent melasma. The trigger is internal. The sun makes it worse, but it's not the source. And this is precisely what Skin Signal teaches. The location of the pigmentation changes, that it tells you something about what's happening inside of your body. Forehead pigmentation, cheek pigmentation, cheek pigmentation, every location has a story, okay? So take your skin assessment and get your free Skin Signals ebook. All right, perimenopause and menopause. The behavior of the melanin system shifts during those stages. Estrogen normally has a modulating effect on the melanocyte stimulating hormone. So as estrogen declines, the modulation becomes less consistent. The cell turnover rate slows. We've talked about that, which means pigmented cells stay on the surface longer. And in the inflammatory environment of perimenopause, which includes an increase in inflammatory markers in the blood, it creates more of the internal triggers that activate eumelanin production. So for the woman who has been frustrated that her dark marks take so long to fade, understanding this helps. The marks fade as the underlying inflammation resolves and as the skin's natural skin cell turnover eventually brings new cells to the surface. Speeding that process means addressing inflammation, and then addressing it internally. It's supporting that skin cell turnover rate with the right botanical ingredients and protecting the skin from additional inflammation. Inflammation triggers. Okay? So in episode 5, we're going to go into the neurotransmitter conversation, and specifically the relationship between melanin and dopamine that most people in the mental health world are still not talking about. So subscribe so that you are there for it. I really appreciate you joining me during this series. It looks good to feel good. So love you. I am Chantel. This is Love You Studios Holistic Wellness Center. And in plain terms, to wrap it up, what this means practically, as you move through perimenopause, your skin is more reactive to inflammation and slower to recover from it. That combination is why dark marks seem more persistent in midlife than they were at 30. The solution is not more lightening treatments. The solution is reducing the internal inflammation through nutrition, through herbal support, and through managing the hormonal transition and supporting faster skin cell turnover rate with botanical skincare that works with your biology. Your skin is not failing you. It is simply responding to a system that is in transition. And that is a completely different conversation than my skin is broken or it's breaking out. So thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in episode 5. Until next time.